thank you to Erwin and to Christopher so far. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jordan Owens. I like long walks on the beach. Well, lately I like drinking a lot of... Anyway, not important. It's great to be with you guys today. And I look forward to having a discussion. The good news is I tend to talk a lot, but we don't have that many slides. It's not my normal 78 different slides that we're going to go through today. It's a very focused conversation on the meetings of the future, because the reality is that we are all trying to figure out what this world really means to us. We need to understand how we start to go forward, because I think we've gone through a relatively significant transformation over the last few months. And so we need to think about what this now means going forward. As we've consumed it, to Chris's point, we've tried to scale up what we already have as fast as possible to be able to support the work from home culture. Well, now we get the opportunity to take a little bit of a step back and say, well, what about now as I go forward even further? What do I want to do next? How do I want to consume that next? And what do I need to think about when we get there? Well, the good news is we've been thinking about this for quite some time, and I think we've got some really cool, really interesting ideas that we want to bring to you, and we're going to cover it from these specific bullets. One of the biggest issues with today's environment is that you, the user, have to adjust to the app. It's not the other way around. If I want to consume video conferencing, I have to spend some time and I have to sit here with my laptop or sit here with my endpoint and I say, okay, hold on. This button means I need to do this. This panel does this. I have to drag this into a different way. I have to shrink this. And what happens if I want to do this? It's just fundamentally broken the way that has to happen. As we really look into the future, as we really look into video conferencing, what's next, it's about how does the user just simply consume the app adjusts to the user, and then ultimately we then can refocus on the meeting. So before we get there, let's take a little bit of a step back. And what is the meeting of the future? Well, to be super, super candid with you, it's just a meeting. The meeting of the future is no different than the meeting of today, with one really big exception. The meeting of the future, 100% of the time, will be a video meeting. Does that mean it's always going to be a video meeting with everybody that's joined from home just like they are now? No. You heard Erwin talk about that earlier, where there are people that are itching to go back to the office. I have, candidly, a little bit of a luxury in that I've been in this office every day since the pandemic started. But I'm also the only one in the office. There's no better social distancing than there is inside of our Herndon office. One day I'll have to deal with Carl sitting next to me again, and I look forward to that. At least that's what I tell him. But the reality is that there will be people that come back into the office, and eventually we get there. But once people come back into the office, we will still have a lot of meetings over video. Every single meeting will ultimately consume video. But it's going to be different. We have to think about a video meeting differently. We're not all going to cram into a conference room on two sides of the country, two different parts of the world, where we're all huddled around a big monitor. We have to think about desktop collaboration. We have to think about mobile collaboration. We have to think about how we join into a meeting. We have to think about how do we make this entire environment much easier and much more simplistic to consume across the entirety of the workforce. The reality is that the meeting of the future will never be more complex. It is going to be incredibly difficult. And as a result of that, manufacturers like Pexip, and there are others, I don't know why you would want to work with anybody else, but anyway, that's beside the point. The meetings of the future will never be more complex, and that means it's our responsibility to make sure that we make it as easy as possible, we make it as simple as possible, we make it as frictionless as possible to get into the meeting, to have the meeting, and to get on with your day. So what that means is we now need to shift the focus, and we really need to think about it from the end user's perspective, because it needs to be all about the end user. So in order to do that, we first have to define who is the end user. Well, really, it's two people. It's the actual end user, right? The individual that's in the meeting, the individual that's consuming the app, the individual that is joining into the video conference, the one that's presenting, the one that's consuming the presentation, the one that's interacting within the meeting in some way, shape, or form. But it's also the administrative end user. One of the things, and Chris talked a lot about this, right? One of the things that we've all forgotten over history is how hard it is to run these systems. Well, how do we take this next generation? How do we take this next step and think about it from the administrative aspect as well? How do we make their job easier so they can solve more problems and they can make sure they're focused on enabling their end users and contributing back to the strategic part of the consumer? So let's ask that question, right? Because we've defined that it's two people. Well, that's not entirely true. The reality is that the end user is really more than just two people. It's different departments. It's different roles within the organization. It's people that are individual contributors to leadership roles, to people that are in HR or finance or IT or sales or solution architecture. Any one of a number of different organizations, no matter what they do within the organization, are now end users. Maybe they weren't in the past. Maybe HR didn't use video to conduct interviews. They caused people to come into the office. They don't do that today. Maybe finance didn't join into video conferencing because they were all centrally located in the office. And if they needed to get into a meeting, they would huddle around a whiteboard or they would get into a conference room or whatever it would be, and they would have their meeting. Not anymore. The idea that video conferencing is only segmented to a small portion of our organization is a thing of the past. We can no longer think of video conferencing as something that only reaches a small few, nor can we think about conferencing from the perspective of, I'm going to control access, I'm going to limit access because I don't want to think about how many different ports I need in my MCU. We now have to think about the entirety of the conversation differently. From an organizational structure, we also have to think about the world very differently as well. Now, you, the customer, don't necessarily, because you understand your organizational culture. You understand if you're a hierarchical company or you're more of an agile company or you're a hybrid between the two, how you ultimately consume technology. But I, as a developer, I, as a builder of apps, have to think about the world differently. And I have to make my app easily used within a hierarchical structure where you often have conversations between individual contributors who then present to leadership, who then presents to their leadership, and then that goes down into other departments or other individual contributors. But I also have to think about it from an agile workflow perspective. Something where individuals are often brought into meetings for very short durations and then they have to leave. A lot of current apps, if you bring in somebody for just one meeting, they remain resident within that meeting for all eternity. They keep getting updates when the meeting gets postponed, or somebody sends a persistent chat into the meeting and they keep getting pinged from it. They often continue to get bombarded with information from a meeting that they may only have joined once. How do we allow those individuals to join the meeting, contribute, provide the value that they want to provide, and then back out of that meeting and return to what their everyday is? We have to give organizations the capability to get there. So what's the whole point of this? The reality is that tools, the way that they're built today, are built in a very myopic focus. What does the video conferencing industry need to do in order to make this app easy to use? Well, that's broken. We instead have to switch that focus to say, what does the user need in order for them to be able to consume that? How does the user ultimately need to interact directly within this app? And the way that we will think about this is to look at the meeting in terms of three specific stages. We'll look at the pre-meeting, during meeting, and post-meeting. How do I get into my meeting, and what are the things that I need to do from an end user perspective? How do I need to support that? Once I'm in the meeting, how do I contribute within that meeting? How do I then support that? And then how do I leave the meeting and get back on with my day? How do I get back to work? How do I forget what I was just involved in and actually go back to where I contribute? And the way that we'll start this, so we'll break this down individual stage by stage, And let's start with looking at it from the pre-meeting perspective. So what are all of the activities that we have to think of from a pre-meeting perspective? Well, first of all, we have to create a meeting. So the app of the future won't really create a lot of friction with regards to creating a meeting. Today, if I want to go to and create a meeting, okay, I have to think about it from this perspective. Okay, hold on. So I want to create a meeting. So I have to open up my email because I want to create a video meeting. And then hold on, okay, so now I'm in my email. Now I have to click on my calendar. And then I have to start a new event. And then I have to scroll to the right or scroll to the left and find the specific button that's there. And, you know, I work for an organization that has 6 different tools to be able to collaborate, so I have to find the right button. Way too hard. Way too full of friction. I should be able to create a meeting from any app. I should be able to do something as simple as send a text message and text Carl. He and I talk 87 times a day, right? I should be able to text Carl really quickly and say, hey, Carl, look, let's jump on a call. Real quick, I'm going to send you a super quick link. You're going to click that link and all of a sudden we're talking. It shouldn't be this hard to create a meeting. The app of the future will allow me to very quickly and very seamlessly create a meeting, to very quickly and without me even really knowing it, switch out of the app where I created that meeting into the app where I'm having the meeting. And then it should allow me to extend that meeting in a very different way. So maybe Carl and I are talking and Carl thinks, you know, I need to bring in Lindsay because we need to get her perspective on something. So then Carl adds Lindsay into that meeting. And then I think, oh, hold on a second. We're talking about this wonderful Back to the Future event. So let me bring in Christopher, and I conference in Christopher, and then maybe Lindsay thinks, well, since Erwin's delivering the keynote, why don't we conference in Erwin? So Lindsay adds Erwin. In the video conferencing world today, that's a disaster. That's a complete disaster because you end up with what is a very technical problem of a cascade upon a cascade upon a cascade, but that shouldn't matter. That is a standard workflow for a conversation. Individuals recognize when more people need to be brought into that conversation, and the app of the future will enable that. It will enable anybody within the meeting to be able to bring in anybody else into that meeting, but automatically consolidate it so that we get a single centralized experience. That's the point. The app of the future will also help me prepare for the meeting. It will help bring notes to the forefront or recognize that, hey, the title of this meeting is the Back to the Future Work event. Hey, Jordan, you promised you'd get the slides done for that event a week ago. You haven't done it yet. Maybe it'll get me moving forward, so I'll get those slides done. By the way, don't ask anybody because I definitely got my slides done on time. Nobody's ever going to complain about that. Anyway, it will allow me to contextually bring in additional information within the meeting so that I can focus on the meeting itself. I often use a variety of different tools within that meeting. So how can I bring those tools to the forefront before I get into the meeting so they're available to me when I'm ready? It will also help me join the meeting easily. We talk about this today a lot with I need to get one-touch join. And I need to be able to walk into a room where I have a Cisco touch panel or a Poly touch panel, and I need to press one button on that touch panel to be able to join the meeting. Absolutely, don't get me wrong, that is extremely important and will be extremely important going forward. But it should work that way from any client, and it should work that way from any device. And the device should figure out what is on my device and invoke the appropriate app to get there. We are in an app culture today, and we should be able to leverage that app culture to be able to get into the meeting more efficiently. So what are the things that AI can do in order to help us there? AI can connect us to all of these different capabilities. It can work within the confines of the meeting itself to bring all of this information to the forefront, to connect multiple things that are seemingly disconnected and bring them all into that same conversation. That's the point here. That's what we're striving to get to, and that's where we will deliver things going forward. Now, if you look at it from a support perspective, we have to enable 2 different types of support here. First, we have to enable the administrator to support this more effectively. An administrator should not only be able to see what's going on right now, but what's going to happen in the future so that they can adapt, so that they can bring in additional tools as well. Maybe they get alerted that there's going to be a VIP meeting coming up and they're going to need to deliver some sort of concierge support. Maybe they see adjusting trends that Meetings aren't just expanding in terms of the quantity of meetings, but the number of people that are in those meetings as well, and they may need to adjust their behavior. They may see that different meeting tools are being used in different ways with different tools that are being integrated in with them, and they need to see those trends so that they can adjust some infrastructure on the back end or adjust some security profiles on the back end to make the world easier without compromising that security. All different types of things that an administrator may need to do in the future, and they should be able to gather those metrics, gather that information out of the tools that are being used within the organization in a single dashboard so they can make the best decisions for their organization. But we also have to think about this from technical support from the end user's perspective as well. I'm technical, right? I mean, it's relatively easy for me to figure out, oh, hold on a second, the app chose the wrong mic, or you know what, my camera's not working correctly. How do I quickly adjust and get into the meeting? But that's wrong, that's broken. I shouldn't have to do that. AI will allow the app to figure out, hey, I know you have two cameras connected. This camera, I see a face. Maybe this is the camera that you want to select. You know, can you confirm that really quickly? Hey, I hear you have two mics connected, but this one's giving me a little bit more clear audio or less noise or something along those lines. Or, hey, you know, I know you selected this mic. I'm not detecting any audio. Is that intentional? Do you have your mic muted? Is there something maybe that you need to do? How can the app understand what I'm doing from my device's perspective and allow me to get into that meeting more effectively? Now let's switch and let's start talking about the world from in the meeting. What do we do within the meeting? Today, way too much. We as end users have way too many choices in front of us. We have way too many buttons in front of us, and it's unbelievably confusing. And all we're doing as manufacturers today is we're throwing more buttons out there. We're throwing more knobs out there. We're throwing more controls out there to the end user saying, hey, you want to change your layout? Well, click this button and then click that button. Hey, you want to mute your mic? Well, you need to move your mouse so that the mic button appears, and then all of a sudden you can click it and it'll turn red. But if you don't click it fast enough, it'll disappear again. We're making it way too difficult to do that. We need to have contextual-based controls, and we need to extend the ability for the end user to be able to adjust their meeting, but do so by somewhat reading their mind. Maybe when I get into a large video meeting and I see that I have 47 people that are connected into this meeting, maybe I extend a zoom in, zoom out type of a button to an end user so they can focus the meeting on the individuals that are talking and then pull back when it makes more sense to look at the entirety of the office. Maybe the app needs to notice that, hey, I've stopped talking for a little bit. Maybe it's going to not necessarily automatically mute my mic, but lower the audio that's coming from my mic until it detects that I start talking again so it doesn't pick up any background noise. Maybe the app needs to start to look at things around, hey, I moved out a camera and I need to refocus my camera, move the camera, pan the camera so that I can automatically stay in frame, all of those types of things. The apps of tomorrow won't try to do too much and won't try to extend too much to the end user, but they will contextually adjust based on what's going on inside the meeting and extend the right controls at the right time. Now, when you look at presenting within the meeting, I mean, I know I specifically, in most of the meetings that I'm in most of the meetings that we as a company are in most of the meetings that our customers are in, a lot of them are discussing presentations of some type. Maybe we're presenting something like we are today. Maybe we're collaborating on a document, whatever the case may be, but we're presenting something as well. And a lot of the apps today, in order to facilitate that presentation, they try to replace the tools that I'm used to using today. They try to force me from my old analog, archaic whiteboard that I have hanging on my wall into something that's more digital and that's built within the app itself. The apps of tomorrow won't do that. The apps of tomorrow will be much better at extending both new and old technologies and integrating those new and old technologies into the app itself, giving the end users more capability, giving the end users more familiarity because they can use the exact same tools that they're used to. If you look at my office, you'll see, and I am not joking, 3 old $20 whiteboards that are hanging on my wall. That's how I feel comfortable. When I need to brainstorm something, I'm up on those whiteboards and I'm drawing or I'm writing or I'm erasing or I'm doing whatever, and it gives me that creative outlet, so to speak. I should be able to easily and quickly share those old $20 analog whiteboards in the meeting of the future. Instead of moving my camera so that I can catch those whiteboards and say, hey, can you guys see this, or is the glare too bad? The system should allow me to bring those systems in. If I want to use the digital whiteboard, by all means, don't get me wrong, but it should extend the capability to all of the old systems that I use as well. I should have the flexibility to choose what is most appropriate for my meeting and the conversation that I have. Gartner has an incredibly good write-up on this called digital dexterity. The idea of digital dexterity is that the user of the future will connect both new and old technologies into the same experience. The apps of the future absolutely have to deliver on that. Now, we're already doing a little bit of this today, shameless plug for Pexip, but we're already doing a little bit of this today with this concept of adaptive composition. And the idea around adaptive composition is that when I connect into a meeting, the system recognizes how many people are in the conference, where those people are with regards to the camera, and automatically focuses the visual image on those individuals and pre-arranges the conference layout so that it most appropriately places the right people into the right places to drive collaboration, to drive interaction within that meeting. The idea around this is fundamentally true for the meeting of the future. How does the system automatically pay attention to what's going on, automatically adjust the layout, automatically adjust the way that video is presented down into the end user, and give them that natural, fluid experience so that the end user doesn't have to think about zooming in and zooming out, doesn't have to think about panning and tilting, doesn't have to think about any type of an adjustment from that perspective. I should also get a native experience on my mobile device, just like I get one on my desktop or in my room system. And that may mean different layouts, that may mean different approaches, that may mean different ways that the meeting itself is conducted or is run. Could mean all kinds of different things, but the meeting of the future should enable that to happen in the right way. And in addition, the meeting of the future should focus on the individual and allow that individual to come to the forefront, to really pop inside that meeting, so to speak, while allowing the background to fade out. But it shouldn't look fake. It shouldn't look false. It shouldn't look like it's a cartoony thing. It should really be focused on driving that face-to-face collaboration, because that's what we're really about today. In addition, the meeting of the future and the artificial intelligence of the future will allow me to connect this meeting to all of the additional work that I need to do. Maybe it's working on a PowerPoint. Maybe it's a document. Maybe it's simply I'm just in here getting something presented to me and I have to approve or suggest changes or whatever the case may be. But it should allow the meeting and the rest of the work that I need to be able to do to connect to it. And in addition, it should connect me with the rest of the work that I need to do as well. If I'm running late for a meeting, the meeting that I'm currently in should allow me to notify that next one. So for example, let's say Carl and I are talking and that conversation's running over for whatever reason, and I'm getting ready to go into a meeting with our marketing team. I should be able to send a message to the marketing team saying, hey, I'm running 5 or 10 minutes late. I'll be there as soon as I possibly can without disrupting the conversation that Carl and I are having. Right now, it's way too complicated. It's way too complex, and we need to make that much simpler as we go forward. From a support perspective, this is all about access to information and the ability to drive down that access into the details so that we can very quickly and very easily get into the problem and solve that problem. And the technology should allow that to not only bubble up so that the administrator can solve the problem, but it should recognize if the technology can solve the problem, it should automatically adjust that. From an administrator's perspective, this is all about single pane of glass. Maybe I have 5 different meeting tools, and that is what's right for my company because I need Google for this division and Microsoft for that division and Pexip for that division or whatever the case may be. And I should have a single pane of glass across all of those different meeting tools and allow me to figure out what's going on very quickly and very easily. It should alert me when I run into issues. So-and-so is exhibiting a bad quality call. Such and such is happening with really bad audio, or the microphone's broken, or whatever the case may be. It should also look into the video experience itself to identify if there are any issues that are happening directly within that video experience, and then suggest paths to be able to succeed. From an end user's perspective, it should understand the inner workings of what's going on within the meeting itself and adjust that experience on the fly. Maybe I'm working from a coffee shop and the lunch hour just hit, and there's a whole bunch of people that came in, and all of a sudden access to public Wi-Fi went from relatively good about a half hour ago to absolutely terrible right now. It should figure that out quickly and adjust my experience appropriately so that I can still contribute into the meeting as effectively as possible without breaking down in its entirety. All of this is extremely important as we figure out how we're going to interact with video technology in the future. So that's before the meeting and getting into the meeting. That's in the meeting itself and how we need to contribute and how we need to collaborate within that. Let's talk about it from after the meeting, because quite frankly, I would argue this is almost just as important as everything else, if not exactly as important, because I myself spend a lot of time in meetings, and it'd be great to be able to expedite leaving that meeting and getting back to work. The app of the future will allow me to contextually switch out of the meeting and get right back into work without having any level of friction or any level of issues getting back into it. Maybe I'm working on a Word document because I'm working on a security document or an RFP or whatever it is that we work on an everyday basis. And after I'm done with my meeting, instead of me hitting disconnect and then closing down that app and then bringing up Word again so that I can focus on that app and get right back into it, and then I got to think, okay, hold on a second. I was in this part and I was wording it this way, and why was I wording it this way? And there's a lot of friction around switching out of one context and into another that's really slowing me down. How do I make it so that it's super simple and super clear when I go back into that document, which happens automatically as soon as that meeting's over? The app reminds me of where I was. The app gives me back that context that I had as I was leaving that app and going right into my meeting to start with. How do I bridge that gap? How do I connect everything that I was doing previous to the meeting back to where I need to be after the meeting without really having to think about it too much? In addition, the meeting of the future, once I leave it, will give me all of the supporting details of that meeting so I don't miss on any of the action items. It will give me my notes. It will remind me of the action items that I need to do. If I told somebody that I would send them a document, maybe it gives me at the push of a button the ability to send that document automatically without me having to do a whole lot of work. How do I get some of the remedial actions off of my plate extremely quickly so that when I go back to focusing on the work that's in front of me, I can concentrate specifically on that work itself, not have to then again stop, think, reset, and then get back to work as I move forward. All of that kind of stuff is going to be important in the future. And then finally, the meeting in the future will understand the experience that I had while I was in that meeting and adjust my experience for the next time in order to give me a better overall experience. Maybe that's reducing bandwidth because I'm coming in from a bad connection. Maybe it's recognizing that at 2 o'clock on Tuesdays, something's happening within the office network. Don't know what it is, but I need to actually, I need to connect in on audio only next time because I can't support video. Or maybe the app even identified that I actually have access to more bandwidth than I thought I did, and it's going to increase my experience as I get into the next meeting so that I have more of that face-to-face, more of that immersive experience that we've all become so addicted to. How does the app understand everything that's happened and contextually apply it going forward? And then from a support perspective, now it's all about trends. Now it's all about reporting, and it's all about identifying when issues were encountered and alerting the right people so they can address those issues before that ticket gets opened. How do I proactively support this stuff the next day? How do I report on the trends that I'm having? How do I identify that, hey, look, maybe meetings inside Pexip tend to be better quality than meetings inside insert other tool? How do I allow that capability to be pushed to the forefront of the administrators so that they can dive things going forward, or so they can divide things going forward? So all of this is great. All of this is really important. But the reality is that privacy is also incredibly important. When you start talking about AI, when you start talking about automating decisions and automating actions, the first thing that pops up into a lot of minds is, well, hold on, does that mean that the app's listening to me? Does that mean that the app is listening to everything that I'm saying and is recording everything that I'm saying and is depositing it somewhere in the internet so that it can be accessed by anybody? Does that mean that somebody else or some other organization or something is broaching my feeling of trust? And the short answer to that is not in the app of the future. Because the app of the future is going to be built with this in mind from the ground up. It'll have modern authorization conversations so that I will be able to it will know who I am, and it will extend the rights. It will extend the capabilities to me because it knows that I'm Jordan Owens, and Jordan Owens should have access to this but not that, or should be able to see this but not that. It will know what I'm supposed to understand and what I'm supposed to see. It will have role-based permissions so that people that work within HR can see the employee records, but people that work within IT won't necessarily be able to see the personal information. But yet people in IT, in order for them to be able to troubleshoot, need to be able to see email activity or text message activity or whatever it may be. It will understand how what I do connects to the organization and how it can influence that type of behavior as well. It'll be responsible though, and it'll be transparent. When information's being recorded, it will tell you what's being recorded. It will tell you how it's using that information, and it will give you visibility so that you can validate it. We shouldn't, as an organization, ask you to trust us without being able to prove to you that we are worthy of your trust. We should be able to, and we can, and we will be able to make sure that you understand everything that the software is doing, where that decision is being made, and why you should be able to trust that decision as well. And we'll validate that not only because we say so, but with independent third parties who will come in and say, hey, look, this company does exactly what they say they're going to be doing. Don't take our word for it, don't take their word for it, but validate it yourself, but know that it has been validated by those independent third parties as well. So just to kind of bring this whole thing around and really talk about this whole diatribe of conversation that we've been having over the last 30 minutes, the reality is that the meeting of tomorrow fundamentally will be a video meeting, period. And I don't think that's up for debate. I don't think anybody that's inside this conference would debate that or would argue that whatsoever. Does that mean that everybody's always going to be working from home? No. But does that mean that people will be working from home in the future or will be working from airports should we ever decide to fly again, or coffee shops, or grandma's house, or whatever the case may be? Absolutely. We as humans will be accessing meetings, will be accessing content, will be accessing work from all over the world going forward. And as a result, every meeting will have video into it. Apps themselves will be more simplistic. They will allow me, the user, to get into my meeting, have my meeting, and get out and on with my day in a more simplistic environment. And that functionality will be supported with AI so that I can extend things like context-based controlling, so that I can access different levels of content in a much different way than I can today. It will be less complex and yet will give me more capabilities than I have within the solutions that are available to me today. And fundamentally, they will be secure and they will be private so that I feel comfortable using video going forward. So that, at least in my view of the world, is what the app of the future will do. We'd love to hear your feedback, so please do submit those questions online. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you disagree with, and I look forward to engaging with you.